So I sent my intro email, and then I think we met later that week via Zoom. It was only 30 minutes, and it very much was a discovery conversation. So I asked him about his BU experience and his career and his hobbies. I was really leaning into what was interesting to him. He did have some wealth indicators that I was picking up on. So we got talking about scholarship options and naming scholarships. And I told him, a current use scholarship starts with a gift of $10,000 and an endowed scholarship is $100,000. And as soon as I said that, he was like, 100,000, that's what I was thinking. And I was like, okay.
Welcome to the EverTrue Innovators Podcast, where we meet the innovative voices behind the ideas moving fundraising forward.
All right, Keith, Boston University's Emma Callahan is proof that polite persistence really works.
Absolutely. 7 touch points later, she secured a planned gift plus $200,000 current use gifts, all from the same donors, which is just incredible.
Yeah, her story is what the donor experience model is all about.
Absolutely. And with that, let's dive in with the winner of the Trailblazer Award for DXO Excellence, the very first client of ThankView, by the way, Boston University. Before we start in, could you please introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself, your role, and then we can dive in.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me today, Hannah and Keith. I am Emma Callahan-Medina now. I got married. It's been a year, but I still am adjusting to the new last name.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. So I have worked at BU for a little over 2 years, and I started off as a donor experience officer. And then about a month ago, I actually transitioned to my new role as a leadership giving officer for the dental school. So I was on the central annual giving team. Now I'm working directly at the dental school, and I'm really grateful for my time from when I was a DXO. I feel like it was a great foundation for my fundraising career.
Well, thank you very much for the intro. It's a pleasure to have you. And I'm going to jump in with a question that we ask everybody on here because we are genuinely very curious to know what you think about this. What is one piece of conventional wisdom about fundraising that you secretly disagree with?
I think one piece of fundraising wisdom that I don't agree with is that you have to ask in person or, you always have to meet in person. I think the DXO program has proven that virtual meetings can be just as effective. And of course, sometimes it's really important to be in person, and some people prefer that, but I think virtual meetings allow for a lot of flexibility, and it's actually easier to schedule with our donors and prospects.
That's a great answer and a great insight. Sitting down for the cup of coffee versus having the virtual coffee, and how effective it can be, especially just given how normal this feels compared to even just a few years ago.
So, Emma, you've been described as someone who revolutionized the DXO role at BU. So, congratulations for that, because that's a big deal. But before we dive into some of the more specific stories that we want to talk about today, can you share how you approached the DXO role and why you feel like it was maybe a little bit different than the traditional way to approach it and the mindset shifts that kind of helped you find that success?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm very flattered that someone said that about me, and I'm grateful. It's really, really nice. So I think how I approach the DXO role, I don't think it's that groundbreaking. I think the training was really great, and the cadence outreach approach is really, really effective. And I guess the one thing that is different about me potentially is my mom is a fundraiser. So I kind of grew up in the field, and I feel like that helped me to have a pretty solid foundation and be comfortable around donors. Obviously, when I was little, I didn't even realize who I was with and the events I was going to. I just thought it was like a fun event, but really they were full of donors. So I feel like that helped me to have a good understanding of fundraising through like osmosis. But That's the foundation that I think has been helpful in addition to the cadences and the training that you all provided. And perhaps if a brand new DXO is listening to this, I was really, really nervous in the beginning. I was terrified to have a donor meeting. But I think the second you shift your mindset to this is just a person and we're connecting on the human level, and hopefully I'll be able to ask them for support if I can. If it's not that big of a deal, I can always do it next time. I got a lot more comfortable. And then once you get like a couple visits under your belt, you're good.
Just in having conversations too, like bringing that human element back of we're all just people here to have a chat. It doesn't have to be this high pressure situation. It doesn't mean that you can't follow like certain formalities and everything, but just to bring it back down to human basis and
Yeah.
trust yourself there.
Well, I do require 30 minutes of self-affirmations that I tell myself in front of the mirror before kicking off one of these interviews. No, I don't do that. But that is good advice, and thank you for sharing it. I'm sure it is really, really nerve-wracking too, especially given, probably a meeting in person, I imagine, is going to be somebody who you plan on asking for more than to cover the cost of the cup of coffee. So,
But the DXO role is such a perfect intro to fundraising, and it's such good practice for conducting meetings and making the ask. I had never really had a donor meeting prior to that, and I think that's why I was so nervous. But again, it's not that big of a deal.
so let's dive into a couple standout examples from your work in action here. One of them that was part of the award submission that was submitted on your behalf did highlight some incredibly successful outreach to a high-level alum that resulted in two six-figure gifts and a planned gift. And then the other was a lower level donor who didn't respond until the seventh touch point. I'd love for you to be able to walk us through your overall strategy for building the connection over time, and then how you tailored that approach to the different types of prospects that you spoke with.
Yeah. So for the first alum that you mentioned, he actually responded really quickly to my initial outreach. And just a side note, I feel like the videos were effective and many people remembered me. Like if I would call them and follow up after, they remembered like, oh yeah, you sent me that video. But so my first alum, he responded immediately and then we had a really good meeting. At the end of the meeting, I knew that he was a major gift prospect and he was excited to get involved. So I think knowing when to loop in your colleagues is really important. I knew I needed to bring in a major gift partner from his school, and we kind of cultivated the relationship together. And I'm grateful to her because she allowed me to stay involved the whole time. Sometimes I think these handoffs happen and then the DXO or the lag person just gets dropped. But we had a really good connection in that first meeting, and my colleague noticed that when we finally had our lunch meeting with him. So she was an advocate for me, which I was grateful for. So bringing in the people you need to kind of close those gifts is really important. And then the second one that you mentioned, he made it all the way through qualification cadence and didn't respond. And then finally, he responded, thanks for your persistence, I guess. And I was like, oh God. Is this positive or negative? I don't really know. But ultimately, we did get to meet. We had a good meeting. There were very specific things he was interested in, and he had a lot of follow-up questions. So I left the meeting with some to-dos. And then once I emailed him the answers, then he would have more follow-up. So I would have to keep doing research. I felt like I was putting a lot of effort into this prospect and conversation, but it felt like that was my job.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I don't know that other people would have put so much effort in, but it just felt important to me. So kind of understanding what the donor wants and how they would like to be engaged with the university and answering all their questions was really important to me. So ultimately, we landed on him making $1,000 gift. And I think the nicest, most affirming thing that he did was actually email our senior vice president a really nice letter about my approach and how I didn't put pressure on him. And I think that's one of the most important things to me is trying to be donor centric.
Mm.
And of course, I would prefer every donor to give $1 million, but I know that that's not realistic, and I never want someone to walk away from the meeting thinking, oh, she was so annoying, she was so pushy. I just want them to feel good, have a positive experience on behalf of BU.
What were kind of the motivations to keep you going with that outreach and like keep up that polite persistence? And was
Yeah.
there anything in particular that you feel like really resonated or helped you break through finally with him?
Yeah, I think I looked at his giving history and he hadn't given a lot, but he did support our diversity and equity and inclusion efforts. I just gave a little update, like, here's what's going on campus. I noticed that you supported this in the past. Thank you so much. And that persistence and kind of letting him know I'm not going to give up until he responds. And I think I know what you're interested in, but I would love to have a conversation about it, was ultimately what led us to meeting.
So that was the smaller gift. So on the flip side, with the higher level alum, your outreach led not just to the meeting, but a pretty major gift there. So I'm just curious, how did you approach that ask once you had built a connection with them?
Yeah. So I sent my intro email and then I think we met later that week via Zoom. It was only 30 minutes and it very much was a discovery conversation. So I asked him about his BU experience and his career and his hobbies. I was really leaning into what was interesting to him. He did have some wealth indicators that I was picking up on. So we got talking about scholarship options and naming scholarships. And I told him, a current use scholarship starts with a gift of $10,000 and an endowed scholarship is $100,000. And I feel like that's a really effective way to just like float those numbers to see what their reaction was. And as soon as I said that, he was like, 100,000, that's what I was thinking. And I was like, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And this was my first major gift. And then I remember I got off the call. I was so excited because I knew he was really interested and I knew what I needed to do next. And I got off and I immediately called my mom and I was like, Mom, this is what he wants to do. Of course, she was so excited and proud. And I was like, this is why people are fundraisers. Being able to talk to those people and make the connection, hear their story and their really positive experiences with your institution, and then being that connector of the impact that they want to have is just the best feeling. So that's what we did. And then a couple of weeks later, we had lunch and solidified he actually wanted to do $100,000 current use because he wanted to have an immediate impact. And then he did another 100,000 and he named us as the beneficiary of his DAF. That's his planned gift. And I think there's more to come.
Wow. Did you play it cool when they said 100,000?
I did play it cool until the camera was off. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, what do I do? I want to call my manager. I want to call my mom. I
Yeah.
want to tell my husband.
Yeah.
Yeah, really, really exciting.
And to be clear, this was a virtual meeting?
Yeah, yeah,
That's
virtual meeting, totally. And he had only given $1,000 in the past, and he had actually sent an email in response to, I don't know, a policy or whatever at BU that was changing that wasn't exactly positive. So I
Mhm.
didn't really know. Like going into the meeting, I was like, oh my God, like,
mm,
how's this gonna go? And I just think you never know. Like someone could send the angriest email and then be so lovely and excited to just talk to someone and have someone listen to their concerns. I was making assumptions and he was so lovely from the get-go, but I just didn't know.
everything that you've shared, both of these stories have really shown how effective cadenced outreach can be. And we'd love to just learn more about how your approach to the DXO role, that cadence-based outreach, has impacted the way that you're thinking and the team is thinking about pipeline development and kind of the future of the program or team collaboration at BU.
Yeah, I think the DXO roles are so, so, so important for discovery work. and pipeline development because I was able to find a lot of major gift prospects and people with capacity and plan giving prospects. And they're people who are unrated, haven't given, or have only given a little bit. Our major gift colleagues are not necessarily going to reach out to them or go visit them. But when you can have that initial meeting via Zoom, and then I can qualify them, and I always ask about plan giving. I usually say, has anyone from BU ever told you about the possibility of leaving a legacy gift in the form of a plan gift to BU? So then it kind of puts it on us. Like, oh, if you don't know about this option, that's our fault because we haven't educated you.
Mm.
And I know we're not supposed to ask yes or no questions, but I feel like that's a really effective one. And then responding authentically. So if they say, no, I'm not going to add BU to my estate plans because I'm supporting my grandkids and I want to make sure that they're all set. I always say that's so wonderful. Family's so important. I'm glad that, that's your plan.
Mhm.
Never any pressure, because like what good is that going to do? So all that's to say, I think DXO discovery work is really, really important for pipeline building. And I am grateful that BU is going to rehire for our DXOs because we have 400,000 alums and that's a lot of people to get through. And I
Yeah.
think the DXOs can do it, 1,000 at a time.
Agreed. So, as you told us early on, you are stepping into a new role. So, congrats on that. And we are curious how your past experience as a DXO shaped how you plan to approach your next chapter. Any like lessons learned?
Yeah. I'm planning a trip and I'm using Signal and I created my own cadence. Using Signal and EverTrue is the most efficient way to do one-to-one outreach that's personalized.
Mm.
I'm grateful that I've had that training and I know that this resource exists. In addition to that, I think the polite persistence is something that I am taking with me into my new role. And then as much as I hated phone calls while I was a DXO, and I still don't love them, I'm comfortable on the phone and I can thank the DXO role for that. So I'm really, really grateful that that was kind of like forced onto us because it's such an effective way of reaching some of our alums who don't use email or we don't have good contact info for them.
Well, I feel like you've had a lot of good nuggets of wisdom throughout this entire interview. But what advice would you give to other DXOs or fundraisers who are trying to connect with unresponsive donors or potential donors, alumni, whether that's for leadership
Yeah.
level gifts or just building that baseline that you had mentioned?
I think trying every angle, so LinkedIn, video, email, texting, phone calls, handwritten notes is really, really important. And actually, I got to a handwritten note step for one of my alums and I looked up their address and I noticed that they were like two doors down from my aunt and uncle. And I had called this man so many times. And finally, I had already sealed the envelope. And on the back, I wrote, P.S. Like, your neighbors with my aunt and uncle. And then he finally called me back. He was like, I'm not interested in talking to you, but cool that we're neighbors. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
whatever. At least I know now.
Yeah.
So I think any of those personalized touches that you can add really do make a difference. If someone is not responsive, if you've tried everything, I think it's okay to move on. Don't stay too long, like,
Mm.
15 touch points. That's probably enough. If you've tried everything, be okay with moving on because at least at BU we have so many alums and there are so many people who want to talk that it's important to know when to stop. I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, that sounds like good, also just general mental health
Yeah.
advice for someone in the role, putting a lot of pressure on themselves.
Yeah.
So, really good
Yeah.
advice.
Yeah.
Well, I do just want to say thank you so much for diving into the specifics of your story, and so much advice that I feel like you've given to current DXOs, future DXOs, or just really anyone that's going to start approaching frontline fundraising and kind of getting thrown into a whole new world and all the pressures that come with it. So, really, really appreciate your time And congrats again on being an EverTrue Innovator.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.